The next script that we're going to make is probably our most reusable script that we'll create in this entire project. This is one that I have a feeling we're going to be referencing a few times in the projects to come, and is really a very, very powerful tool that you can use not only in your Techability projects, but in projects that you do on your own. And what this is going to be called is an interaction script. This is going to be what's going to allow us to use items. We're going to be able to walk up to something, press the E key, and make it do something. That's obviously a very useful tool in all games, and we want to make sure that you fully understand what we're doing here so that when we use it again in the future, you have no problems implementing it and reusing it. So to start, we'll again go ahead and start in our resources folder. We're going to right-click, click Create, and then C# script. And we're going to call it interactable. So that's that there. Of course, you can rename it if you have to, but we want it to be interactable there and interactable here. We're going to open that up. And the first thing we need to do before we start actually writing any code is we need to go up into this top section. And these are called headers. These give us access to code that are in like built-in scripts, like scripts built into the Unity engine. We're going to use a new one called Unity Engine.events. So we'll type Unity Engine using space Unity Engine.events with a capital E. And that's going to be what drives the whole ability for us to interact with objects in our scene. Next, we're going to click into our class here inside our curly brackets. And at the very top, we're going to give ourselves some space and type public Unity event on interact. And this is going to hold the value for all the, or hold the references to all the code that we want to trigger when we interact with this object. Excuse me. Next, we want to say public float interact cooldown. So this is just going to be the amount of time that has to pass before each interaction. So we're going to say 0.5s, so half a second is pretty good. That way you can't just spam the button over and over and potentially break something. And then we're going to say bool can interact equals false. And that's going to just control whether or not we are actually able to do the interaction when we press the button that we want to press. So we can delete our start method. We don't have anything that we're going to put in there. But inside update, we're going to add a couple things. We're going to say if interact cooldown is greater than 0, then inside the curly brackets, we want to say interact cooldown minus equals to time.delta time. And we've done this a few times already, this project, but just as a reminder, that's just going to make it so that every frame, this value is counting down, and then once it's less than or once it's equal to 0 or less than that, we will say interact cooldown equals 0. And then outside of our else statement here, we're going to say if can interact, so that Boolean variable at the top, and interact cooldown is equal to 0, which we need two equal signs here. Inside of a conditional statement, you need two equal signs to ask if something is equal or equivalent in value. If it's one equal sign, that's what you use to assign a value like you would up here. So we need two equal signs. We're going to add our curly brackets, and we're going to say inside that, if input.get key down keycode.e, and then throw some curly brackets in there. We're going to set our interact cooldown back equal to 0.5f. And we're going to say on interact dot invoke. And what this line of code does is, you'll see in a second when we set up our first interaction, every piece of code that we put into the Unity event will be called, will be activated, will be used when we do this dot invoke. So when we press E, we will invoke that interaction. And then we need to drop down outside of our update brackets, not outside of our class brackets, but outside of our update brackets. We're going to hit enter a couple times, and we're going to say void on trigger enter. Make sure we've got that collider in those parentheses there. And we're just going to say if other.tag equals player. And we're going to drop some curly brackets outside of that as well. And we're going to say can interact is true. So the way that this is going to be controlled is there will be a trigger collider attached to an interactable, and when the player is inside that trigger, they can press E to do whatever it is we need it to do. We're going to add another private void on trigger exit this time, again with the collider.other, and we can even just copy and paste this code from enter into exit, but we're going to swap can interact to false. So make sure that we don't have the whole on trigger enter in here. We just want the if statement copied over. And we're going to set that equal to false. And then we're going to double check. It's always good to double check these sorts of things. We're going to double check that we have our player tag. So if you don't have your player tag here, just click the tag drop down and select player. That's going to make sure that when we are inside that trigger, we are able to actually interact with the object.